समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
The recent Israeli strikes on Hamas leaders in Qatar has ruffled an already volatile Middle East chessboard. Now, on the surface, Saudi Arabia's newly signed defense pact with nuclear-armed Pakistan looks consequential, but for now, it is more symbolic than real. I'll come back to that pact at a later stage. But for now, the deeper story lies elsewhere. In the Middle East, violence shows no sign of slowing. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who is called Bibi by his supporters and detractors alike, appears determined to settle what he considers Israel's defining struggle, which is the confrontation with Iran and its network of proxies. Now, for him, this is not just geopolitics, it's about legacy. Netanyahu wants nothing less than to redraw the region's order, and the consequences will extend well beyond the Middle East, reaching as far as New Delhi. To grasp this escalation, one must view it as a political thriller where Netanyahu has rehearsed the wargaming and the climax for decades. So what is Bibi's worldview? Now, for that, we'll have to look at the fundamentals. Roots of Iran-Israel hostilities go back to the 1979 Iranian Revolution. Since then, Israel has vowed never to allow Tehran to acquire nuclear weapons. Netanyahu made this his central mission, openly calling for preemptive strikes since at least the 1990s and casting himself as Israel's ultimate guardian. For years, his actions were bound by US limits. Washington did provide intelligence, cover, and support, but Washington also imposed some red lines. Now, that equation changed after Hamas's 7th October 2023 attack on Israel. Netanyahu used the cowardly assault to justify escalation, seizing unprecedented backing from the Trump administration, which went so far as to authorize a B-2 bomber strike on Iran's Fordo nuclear facility just a couple of months ago. Now, despite Trump's occasional rhetoric about deals with all sides, nothing of this scale moves in the Middle East without Washington's consent. Now, for now, Netanyahu has it. Israel will not stop short of closure. And with Trump's support, Bibi believes his long-sought showdown is within reach. Now, what about the other Gulf states? What they have been showing is a calculated ambivalence. For decades, Iran projected influence through a web of proxies. I'm sure you've heard of them. Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and Houthis in Yemen, alongside a patchwork of Shia militias in Syria and in Iraq. Now, together, they formed the so-called Axis of Resistance, Tehran's forward defense and regional leverage. But the network is fraying. Hezbollah, which has long been the centerpiece, has been weakened by Israeli strikes that have killed its leaders and eroded its ability to act on Tehran's behalf. Hamas, too, has seen its command structure shattered. Even the Houthis, long dominant in Yemen's grinding conflict, are facing unprecedented Israeli pressure. So what once appeared as a resilient axis now looks fragmented and weakened. Through much of this upheaval, the Gulf Cooperation Council, or the GCC states, have kept their distance. The understanding has been tacit. Israel would weaken Iran and its proxies while the Gulf avoided entanglement. In effect, Israel did what everybody calls dirty work. Now, that balance shifted recently when Israel struck Hamas leaders in Qatar, violating Qatari sovereignty and unsettling Gulf elites. Now, Doha, which has stayed quiet even after the Iranian missile struck a US base on its soil in retaliation for the American bombing of Fordo, suddenly found itself exposed. The GCC's and Islamic State's formal reaction was limited, once again, to routine condemnation. But Saudi Arabia quietly added a new twist. It signed a defense pact with Pakistan. Symbolic or not, the move has unsettled the region, signaling both deterrence to Israel and Iran and diplomatic warmth towards Islamabad. The timing, by the way, was telling. It came only hours after Riyadh publicly wished Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi a happy birthday. Now, let me tell you a bit more about the unfinished campaigns in Syria and Iraq. Since 7th October 2023, the Middle East has unfolded like a fast-paced thriller. If Israel's ultimate climax and endgame is regime change in Tehran, there is little sign that it is imminent right away. The more immediate final chapter, so to say, appears to be Israel's dismantling of Iran's proxy network and whatever it takes. That brings the spotlight to Iraq, apart from unfinished but managed campaigns in Syria. So I'll talk about Syria first. In July 2025, Israel struck Damascus, the capital of Syria, under the pretext of protecting the Druze minority from al-Shara government's crackdowns. Strategically, the aim was to prevent Syria from consolidating military strength near its southern flank, close to the occupied Golan Heights. Golan Heights, by the way, is Syrian territory. Israel has long courted the Druze, embedding itself in Syria's sectarian politics. And what emerges is an implicit understanding between Israel and another regional power, Turkey. Despite their own differences, the two countries, which is Israel and Turkey, share a common goal: keeping the al-Shara regime destabilized. But the question is why? For Israel, southern Syria must stay demilitarized to block Iranian proxies. For Turkey, northern Syria must remain fractured to contain Kurdish militants. Now, this convergence keeps Damascus boxed in, while Tehran and Moscow, distracted and weakened, struggle to shift the balance. Now, with Syria stalemated, Netanyahu would be preparing to turn toward Baghdad. Iraq's strategic value hasn't escaped others either. Just 2 days ago, Sergei Shoigu, head of Russia's National Security Council, visited Baghdad, likely an attempt to shore up Moscow's fading influence in the region and in nearby Syria. And now let's come to Iraq. Perhaps last proxy battleground for Israel, Iraq is pivotal. Pro-Iranian militias there form the financial and logistical backbones of Tehran's regional strategy, creating a land corridor linking Iran to Syria at the time when Assad was ruling it, and then to Hezbollah in Lebanon. Now, if you look at the map, you'll understand what I'm saying. Now, if you remember the 2003 US invasion that toppled Saddam Hussein didn't really end well for the United States, but it opened the door for Iran. As Iraq descended into sectarian conflict, Tehran filled the vacuum, embedding itself across Iraq's political class and paramilitary groups. By 2018, even the US military publications conceded that Iran was the true victor of the Iraq war. More interestingly, through Iraq, Tehran has evaded sanctions, used banks to access foreign currency, and expanded export routes. For years, Iraq was the linchpin of Iran's shadow economy. But that dominance is waning. Baghdad has been cutting Tehran's access to its financial system. During the 12-day war that saw US bombers hit Iranian nuclear facilities, Iraq offered Tehran little more than symbolic support. Iran-backed militias, once quick to strike US forces, largely stood down. Iraqi Prime Minister Mohammad Shia al-Sudani, long viewed as friendly and loyal to Tehran, has recalibrated to avoid clashes with Washington or Tel Aviv. With national elections looming in November 2025, he is carefully signaling more autonomy. And he isn't alone to do so. Lebanon tells a similar story. Anti-Hezbollah candidates are gaining momentum, reflecting public fatigue with Tehran's proxies. Across the region, Iran's aura of strength has eroded. Israel's coordinated and audacious strikes have exposed its inability to defend or sustain its network. Definitely for Netanyahu, then, Iraq represents both an opportunity and a necessity. It is the last major battleground before Tehran itself, although it may not require as much bloodshed as Israel's other campaigns after October 2023. Now, the GCC may again and expectedly denounce Israeli aggression, but privately, few mourn the weakening of Iran's proxies. Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis have long outlived their utility. For Riyadh, Abu Dhabi, and Doha, they are more irritants than assets, destabilizing the region without constraining Israel. In fact, provoking Israel to a level no one expected. Netanyahu knows such a favorable moment may not come again. A Trump administration willing to back him unconditionally, a distracted Europe, a weakened Russia bogged down in a foolish war in Ukraine, and an Iran exposed as fragile. These alignments create a unique window. Indeed, it is a legacy issue for Bibi. He will not leave office without attempting to dismantle Iran's proxy architecture once and for all, at least enough to justify his violence. So what about the Delhi dimension? For India, the strategic ripples are significant. The immediate concern, as I said, and as you may have heard, is Pakistan's diplomatic gain as it embeds itself deeper into the defense framework of the Middle East. How that affects New Delhi's regional calculus will be the subject of a separate analysis. For now, the region remains the burning stage where Netanyahu's long-anticipated climax is playing out. I'll be back to discuss the strategic implications of Saudi Arabia and Pakistan's defense pact. Stay tuned.